What's going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great Tuesday. Is Tuesday New Comic Book Day now?
No.
I I sometimes get new comic books on Tuesdays. It like with the Penguin distribution thing that's happening now. Like they don't always come on Wednesdays, and then you know there's some nice people who give them to me. So I don't. Maybe are they supposed to hold them to Wednesdays? Is that how does this work, Industry Insider?
Well, the inside, from what I hear now, this is just rumor actually. No, the DC folks signed up with a company called Luna, and their distribution is Tuesday. The reason why they switched to Tuesday is they wanted to align the release of the comics to the release in the bookstores at the same time. Traditionally, comics are released on a Wednesday, and they have the full selling week until the following Tuesday if they have a collection to sell prior to landing in the bookstore. So they always had a slight advantage over the bookstore market. And I think the DC folks wanted to level the playing field, so to speak.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, seeing as things are a little shaky, just like with the amount of comic shops there are out there and things like that these days. You want to expand all the distribution as much as you possibly can. And this is somebody who's doing so for Frank Miller, everybody. So I'm sure you've never heard of him before. His name's Dan DiDio. And he writes comic books. So, yes.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this before. I said, the interesting thing for me was that I was actually doing some writing prior to joining DC. I've been executive for a while. I mean, I was an executive at ABC, and then with an animation company called Mainframe. But before joining Mainframe, I was doing animation writing. I did a couple of television series. And then joining DC, I came in the editorial department. But even prior to being at DC, while I was interviewing, I was actually co-writing Superboy with Jimmy Palmiotti. And the two jobs had nothing to do with each other. We always laughed because Jimmy had worked with Joe Quesada. Then Joe went on to be the executive editor or editor-in-chief over Marvel. And then Jimmy worked with me, and I went on to be executive editor. So he's the one who breeds executives in the comic market.
Well, Jimmy's got the Midas touch in a lot so
absolutely.
Definitely. So cool background there.
Yeah.
So you of course took over DC on the editorial side in I think 2002. So and you had that role for a long time. But I found out, and this is what I was telling you ahead of time, like I didn't know you wrote comics, and I did pick up the first 5 issues of Ancient Enemies, which is actually what we're here to promote today.
So you're the guy who bought them. I was trying to figure out who bought those comics.
Yeah. And there's side stories, and I got to get into this because I've read it, and I'm gonna do a full review as a review because I do review videos too. Once the 6th issue's out, because that's kind of where you.
And that's tomorrow. Actually, that's tomorrow. That's the fun part about this.
That's gonna be fun. So that is coming out in comic shops tomorrow, guys. And there's a lot to digest here, and I'm sorry to cut you off about your writing and how you consider yourself a writer first there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
I'm used to people cutting me off. I worked in the comic business and worked for retailers. No, it was it's funny because I had written beforehand, and I do enjoy it. I'm not a writer like most of these guys are, where you have this burning passion as a career, but I certainly enjoy being part of the process and actually just getting your own ideas together. And that's actually a lot of fun and the collaboration that comes along with it, working with an artist. And early on, I mean, when I started DC, I was actually started as a VP of editorial, which was this rather ambiguous job. And then within the first year, I was getting ready to leave, and then I was given the position as executive editor, which I held for almost 8 years, maybe a little bit more than that. And then after that, I moved into the publisher position. So all in all, close to 20 years with DC Comics. But,
is there a lot of difference between the executive editor and publisher position, or is it more of like a title upgrade?
No. There actually is some very strong distinctions. I mean, when you're executive editor, you're involved in the nuts and bolts of the entire line creatively. So you're really helping direct and focus the individual books, very hands-on on the individual talent that being hired and such like that. And while I move into the publisher position, first of all, you're much more concerned about the financial aspects of what's going on, the financial success. You're responsible for all areas, not just publishing, the editorial, but also production, sales, and marketing, and all the other things that fold into the overall company. And then on the other side, when you get involved in the creative, really when I was publisher, I was involved in the preset, the setup, the pre-production aspect of it, up till the approval, then the book disappears into the editorial team. And the next time I see it, it really is the final product a sign off at the end of the day, and you have to make these decisions. And it's an interesting thing when you're involved in that early stage production, and you have this idea and concept of what you think this book is going to be. And then when it lands on your desk, it might not be the same, and it might be dramatically different. And then you have to make a decision whether do we proceed in this fashion? Do we pull it back? Do we slow it down? Do we change it? Or do we just let it go? And those are decisions you pretty much make every day.
That kind of happens at every level, though, because like even like when you're writing a script and you envision something and then you get it back from an artist, and a lot of times it's like you might not even get the script back from an artist until months later, and you don't even remember what you wrote at the time, and it looks good when you see the art on there, and then you go back to like actually the dialogue again. You go, oh God, he didn't even draw remotely what I thought.
Yeah. Listen, and that happens. And I mean, and that's part of the collaborative process. And that's what's good about, you should have this rapport with your talent, that you're always communicating in some way. And you have to understand part of the process is the artist has to be entertained. He has to be interested and excited about what he's doing, or else it really does show dead on the page. If they just follow something that they're not interested in drawing. So you have to give them that creative leeway to be able to bring their own sensibilities. And you have to understand it is a collaborative process. The hardest thing is what you said, though, is omissions. When things aren't there that you thought were there, and you have them in your head, and you don't realize they're missing until either at the very last second or even after it's been published. You say, "Oh, we left."
And that's when you see a lot of awkward dialogue balloons that are explaining things that didn't actually happen on the panel.
Yeah, it is, and that's old school comic storytelling. I mean, they used to be churning this out in such a speed that when the pages came in and the art wasn't there, the dialogue wasn't there to move the character along. The dialogue was there to fill in the blanks about what's missing on the page. And that's the thing you want to avoid, because I think that distracts. When you put too much description in your conversation, it gets very stilted. The best thing is when the art really, I love books that come in and I can follow the story just by the art without any dialogue on it. Because
I always view that as the best art out there, and that's what makes a good comic a lot of the time. Yeah, I do see the super chats. Everybody, I'll run Dan through the gauntlet of super chats after we go through like what he's been up to.
I don't see anything. This is good.
Ancient Enemies sounds great and interesting. Yeah, and we're gonna get to that too for sure.
Yeah.
So I discovered you back in Comic Con 2010 maybe.
Ooh,
and so that's what I was kind of just out of college, and actually I decided to get into writing and making my own independent comics because I was so mad at you and Joe Quesada. Quesada was
take a number.
Yes. And it was and I didn't hate you in 2010 because you hadn't canceled my favorite book yet. I hated you after with the New 52 launched. And so Joe Quesada I hated first. And that was with One More Day in Spider-Man. I mean, you might have heard of that one causing a little bit of friction out there.
Yeah.
Mine was a little less because I'm guaranteed like this didn't sell well enough. And so it probably like 10 years down the line where I'm looking at this, I'm like, I kind of get why he canceled this at the end of the day, but I was very into Stephanie Brown Batgirl. That was my favorite book in DC Comics.
Yeah.
And then the New 52 just going, wash that away. I was like, oh no, I was so upset because my favorite book was gone. But I'm sure there's financial decisions behind that.
Yeah, well, there is. I mean, a lot of it had to do with the resetting to the most recognizable interpretations of the characters.
Fair.
And you know what I mean? And that's always a problem. I mean, I had done a big push for really a next generational drive over the DC universe, and we never got to where I really hoped it could be, and we were never able to do it completely. When New 52 happened, it wasn't because we wanted to restart or something like that. It was actually because the sales were really soft. Overall market didn't have a single book overselling over 60,000 copies.
Wow.
It was extraordinarily depressed. If I remember correctly, the business had dropped from year to date from the previous year almost by 15% overall. So we knew we had to do something drastic. Jim and I were just in a brand new job. We had brand new bosses, and we didn't want to be doing this slow grind down to the industry as just starting in a new position. So we wanted to do something dramatic, and we did. And the thought was to get back to all the characters, the original interpretations. Stephanie Brown's a really interesting character to me because that was a really good book. And We had some great stories planned for her that never came together. And there's always this bevy of missed opportunities. But I always say the books that always are the best ones are the ones that we never made, because they always keep their potential, and they never get a chance to become fully realized. But with Stephanie Brown, we had this wonderful story once planned to get her into the job of Batgirl, where Barbara Gordon gets the use of her legs back, but in a very Flowers for Algernon sort of way, starts to slowly lose them. So she handpicks her replacement and trains her before she loses the use of her legs again. And that's when Stephanie Brown was really supposed to emerge. Instead,
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a really good story.
You skipped over. She's just kind of Batgirl without an origin so much at that point, as I recall.
Yeah, exactly. So we had this story all built, and unfortunately, we were told we weren't allowed to do it. So I had no time to build a new origin, so we sort of just launched, and that was a disappointment. So I was glad to see that book do as well as it did.
How much of that happened? How much of that happened, like overall? Because, like, I mean, a lot of fingers got pointed at you because you're kind of a public face. But I mean, how much control really did you have? Like, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of directives, especially about like kind of the larger property characters like Superman, like Batman, that like you don't even get to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of expectations that you're supposed to meet, and a lot of things you got to watch out for. A lot of those things aren't. It doesn't seem as stringent as it was when I was there. I used to use this. Without going into specifics, what I'll say to this is that when you're in a position in any job, and I'll say this about any job, especially a position of authority, and you're being told or asked to be doing different things with that your job that against what you want to do, it's your responsibility to sort of take the shot for it. You know what I mean? Because if you don't take the hit, then ultimately people see your position as weak and go around you and start to talk to other people. So in order to maintain some level of authority, you have to take the good hits with the bad hits. Do you know what I mean? In order to maintain the role. So it was part of the job coming in. There's a lot of ideas that I would have liked to do that never got done. But then on the other side, there's a lot of things that I never thought we'd get made that did get made. So, it's a balancing act. And I don't think anybody has full control of anything they ever do, including people who do create their own books, just because of this constant limitations put on you, whatever you wind up doing.
But do you feel like you have more control here with Frank Miller than before? Like, is it much more of a chill effort on that level?
There are different concerns. There are different issues. I mean, the great part about it is I got to do my own series with Ancient Enemies, which is what I really wanted to do with this. And with Frank also, he gave me a lot of leeway, believe me. But working on the Svengoolie book was something that's a personal friend of mine, so I really wanted to do something for people I knew. So that was a wonderful opportunity too. And it's great to be able to work with Frank on that side as well. He's doing the books he wants. And right now I'm probably taking a step back from the writing side just to make sure everything is running smoothly, because there's only 4 people running a company. And while you're writing and while you're trying to get the company rolling, something's got to give. So you're always making compromises. And so now I want to take a half step back and just make sure everything's running smoothly, and then figure out what happens after that.
Cool. I was wondering about that because I read once you read into Ancient Enemies, guys, you really set up. I mean, it is a superhero universe at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But you set up world building that's like there's a world of aliens and events that happen around them, and a kind of, it's not exactly a post-apocalyptic future. Like it could have gone that way, but they rebuilt, and then the setup of the geography, the politics is all different than it is now. So you really put a ton into the world building to where it seems like this is not just meant for a 6-issue limited series. It's meant for like an ongoing bigger deal. Was that your intention to begin with here?
I wish I could say that was the case, but I kind of just can't help making. I have to understand the worlds I'm working in, so I got to build them all the way out, to a place where I feel comfortable. So that way, when you start to touch on corners, you have understanding of how the world works and what's happening, what the politics are, because it's important. And even if it just gives some sort of contextual understanding to the characters, for me, it just enriches everything you're doing. And while you touch upon it in different places, it allows the story to hold together much better. Because when I started Ancient Enemies, we were going to go oversized books, and then there was some retailer pushback. So I wound up doing smaller size and then pulling out the origins of the primary characters into one-shots to really help round out the entire concept. And I found I had a lot of fun doing that. And And because I understood how the world worked, I was able to build a rather consistent story, even though I was coming at it from several different angles and with multiple artists.
And in issues 4 and 5, you actually put in backup stories,
Yeah.
like in there. That I mean, that when I got to that and saw that. Oh, actually, I guess there's backup stories before that too.
Yeah.
When I saw the backup stories in there, just that were short backup stories, I was like, this really feels like the old DC comics of yore, like with like Adventure Comics and House of
Yeah.
Mystery and things like that. Just really having like that extra featurette in there. That was something that really struck of classic DC for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also did the what's what pages.
Yes, you did. That's right. That was an issue too. Not who's who.
No,
No,
I have no idea what a
no
who's who is.
copyright infringement.
No, I know what a what is, not a who.
That's
But
so funny.
it's what I love about I love short form storytelling. I absolutely adore it because it really does. If you're not writing on a regular basis, what it does, it really tests your skills to be able to tell something concise and complete and have a little bit of emotional beat and some sort of conclusion in a very short period of time. So it's important for me to be able to constantly flex that muscle because I think it becomes invaluable when you're doing your storytelling. Because if you could do that, then you can build a story that has multiple storylines that you're interacting and feel that you're not sacrificing anything because you're able to tell concise bits of information, but also have strong character beats at the same time, you know?
Yeah, and that's what I felt here when I read the single issue kind of backgrounds on the different characters, and then the different shorts at the end. Those mattered because you actually set up so many little plot threads that you kind of needed those to actually flesh out what they were doing too. So none of it felt, which is nice because in a way it had that event book feel because you've got those tie-ins, but you
Yeah.
didn't do the thing that the major companies do that just is tie-ins for the sake of tie-ins. They all mattered, and that was very well done. Yeah.
It has to, you know what? And I mean, listen, that's what it's about. I mean, at the end of the day, you asked me if I could do more. Yeah, I'd love to do more. It's all going to depend on whether or not there's a need for it or an interest for it. I told the story I needed to tell. I told it in the size that I think works best for it. And there's always going to be more story to be had in the world that you create. It's just a matter of whether or not there's a need for it or there's an interest in it. I'd love to create it because I love to do it, but I'm not going to just create books just for myself. I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'd much rather try a different idea.
You're not Steve Ditko. No.
I get it. I get why people do that. It's just because they're obsessed about it. But I kind of, once you have this one story and you have a lot of fun with it, but I have like 3 or 4 other things that I really want to get working on. I mean, it was interesting during the pandemic. I wrote a prose novel over the pandemic, which was, something that I've never done before. Again, constantly trying to push different sensibilities and different ideas. And I had a blast doing that. So I'm probably more interested in following that story up than in some of the stuff in Ancient Enemies right now,
That makes sense. Cool. So this is the last issues coming out tomorrow, guys, if you are just tuning in. And this is Ancient Enemies. Dan DiDio is the writer on this and the artist on the main book. I don't remember the name. You can tell me.
It's Danilo Beirut. Danilo. You know what? And I just met Danilo on this, but what I really like, he was an incredible storyteller. And that's one of the things I like to work the Marvel style, as they like to call it, which is basically giving full outline and then letting the artist draw from it. I love to see what the artists bring. I haven't worked full script in a while. Because I love collaboration. It's fun. And you were talking about before. You're right. Stuff comes back that you didn't write, or it might be slightly different than what you thought it would be, but that's okay as long as it still works.
As long as it still works, right?
You got to remember what the end result is, and if you're still getting the same end result, and if they're helping to find a different path, then you've got, just like they're working with you, you've got to work with them.
I've the Marvel method's really interesting, and I've done it twice out of the books I've written, and it scares me.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, one time it didn't so much because when I was working with Jesse White and the guy, I was so on the same page with him, and we talked on the phone a bunch, and I could tell he as an artist understood. But the second time I wasn't exactly sure who I was working with, and the book turned out great, but it scares me a lot more than just having those panels kind of laid out there. But I still am very sparse in the way that I talk about things. I loved what you said about leaving the artist leeway. I've got the Killing Joke Absolute Edition, which has the Alan Moore script in the back,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I see his like one panel will have like 2.5 pages of
Yeah.
description to it. It's like I couldn't imagine like if I gave that to an artist, I imagine he'd never want to work for me ever.
Yeah, I mean, you got to realize the amount of respect Alan gets to get away
Right.
with a script like that. I mean, that's
Woo!
yeah. I couldn't
Absolutely
even write like
crazy.
that. I just, I love to see what comes at me because it sort of gets me going. It's almost like a give and take going on there. It makes it a little more playful while you're doing this. Because I hate to say this should be fun, right? There's something
Right.
should be semi enjoyable about doing this.
Seems to be like that's what the industry should be.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of upheaval in the industry over the last couple of years, and I saw Mark Miller posting this morning about a staple comic book shop in New York closing down, and he says, "Hey, if there's not a wake up call yet, something really needs to change, and something needs to like I'm guessing the overall situation is like there's really not a lot of fun coming out of the big two as much anymore. It's I'm hearing this from retailers, and I'm, I don't know. I honestly, after Stephanie Brown, I just started reading indie stuff a lot more because I'm like, you know what? They're just going to cancel my books anyway, which is great.
Yeah,
Cause then I get to read your indie stuff. Right. So what do you think about that? Where do you think the industry's at right now? What should they be doing differently, or should they just be clocking full speed ahead?
it's a hard thing to say. I mean, let's go back to what you said, how you started
Okay.
this.
Sure.
You said, does comics come out on Tuesday or Wednesday anymore? Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
If comics were coming out that you were really excited and couldn't wait to see, you'd know what day they were coming out. The idea of the Wednesday warrior, the one that was waiting online to get those comics because he couldn't wait for his next issue, next story, he wanted to make sure he had it in his hand and read it in the parking lot of the store as they came out. That's something that's been lost. I talked to retailers, and anecdotally, I've heard that Wednesdays is no longer their strongest day, and they've gone from a place where Wednesday used to be their only day of business, and now it's not their day of business.
Wow, that's
And
wild.
there should be a give and take going on here. There's a lot of stuff in the market worth reading. There's just so much out there. And it's funny. We're looking at you're looking at the entertainment industry. You're looking at the organizations of the Writers Guild or the Screen Actors Guild and all these different groups that are out there. There is no industry in comics. There's a bunch of fans and hobbyists. People want to be involved. There's people who think there's this pot of gold at the end of the day. There's people who are thinking that they're only in it for the film and TV. They're creating just pilot scripts or IP. And they've lost the purpose of what comics are all about and what the fun and creation of comics were. And actually, who they were created for. I can't even tell you who the audience is anymore because it's so diffused and so small. And we're working with smaller and smaller, portions of the buying audience, and we don't have an aggregate anymore. One that's really pulling it all together, which I think is a shame. Because comics. You got to remember, comics as a cultural event was low cost entertainment, cheap, cheap form of entertainment. It was almost a counterculture entertainment too. It was a little subversive because remember in the day, parents threw out comics. People railed against comics because they were bad for kids, and now they're being embraced as pop culture. So it's completely flipped the paradigm, and you've taken this thing that was low cost entertainment built for the masses and trying to turn it into something very pop culturist. I don't know if it's really that clean a fit that everybody thinks it is, so I'm not sure if comics serve the same purpose they were when they were first created. I think that's why you see some people gravitate or generations gravitating to anime, because there's lot much more of a simplistic, high energy fantasy aspect that's going over there that I think is much more easily to enjoy than some of the stuff that's a little overwrought and overwritten these days.
I actually like that about your world, talking about the fantasy element, and I think what I see a lot of when I see a lot of I guess elements out of the big two these days, I see them try to insert a lot of like real world political headlines like right into there. And with yours, like you actually have a political struggle going on, but the world's so different that you set up that like the Citadel versus the Americana
Yes.
sort of thing doesn't feel like something that's happening in 2023. It feels like something future and different. And so it is like a world immersion thing where you've actually provided some immersion by adding that element that's not real. It's fantastical, right? And
Absolutely. Well,
I don't know. I don't know why people. It shouldn't be that hard. I don't think, but I mean, you
listen,
did it correctly.
as I like to say, cartoonists are the ones that see the mirror image or the warped mirror image of the real world and tell it in a humorous manner in order to get a point across. They use humor to tell the story. In comics, we use fantasy and science fiction and things of that nature. The whole purpose of science fiction is to tell a story through allegory so that people can understand it from a pure entertainment aspect. But if you get something more out of it, so much the better. And those are the things that have the lasting effect. Without that allegory, and if you hit it real, you have this really hard bang of the fantasy of the superhero versus the reality of reality. You know, I always put that in. While I applaud things like the books from 9/11 and things of that nature, when you put the superheroes at 9/11, it's just, it doesn't feel right to me. You know what I mean?
It doesn't create fun. And like I remember at the time I saw, especially the Spider-Man issue with it, was like actually a pretty emotionally hard-hitting
Yeah, exactly.
story regarding that. And I guess it stuck with me. I mean, I remember it, but do I want to go back and read that again at this point? Not really. I mean, it just like it's not, it wasn't on the fun level.
Yeah.
It made a stark like reality, like being like, and it makes you think, why am I wasting my time sitting here reading Spider-Man? Like the real world's like a lousy place and
Yeah.
blah blah. And you should want the opposite feeling. Like I want to just have my escape from the real world, right?
Listen,
Yeah.
you have to suspend reality and absorb the fantasy whenever you're doing a comic book story, or else it doesn't make sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so once you put too much reality in there, the fantasy gets harder to take, and it's harder to embrace it. So therefore, you need to really find a way to create stories to get that same point across. I mean, in Ancient Enemies, 9/11's over the entire book. It's the heart of the story.
Yeah, they blow up. The craft blows up. It crashes into New York, right?
Yeah, exactly. It takes out
yeah.
the entire city. There's a whole
Yeah.
sequence that takes place at a memorial site. And I go into that a great deal. And even with I did a one shot called First Responder, where he goes back to his firehouse after being transformed into an alien, seeing his photo on the wall of one of the firemen lost in the crash. And
That's what tipped me off to the allegory, actually. So when I didn't actually think about the allegory being for 9/11, I just thought, oh, alien crash, it blew up all this stuff. And I was not in it at all on that level. I was just reading the story. But when I saw the name First Responder, I thought, oh, I understand this now. And that would give me an aha moment. That was really well done. So
that's the goal. And then once you see it, you can see. Then you can go back and read it in a new context and hopefully get more out of the story too, which is even better. You know, for me, I had friends who were on the site on 9/11, so I heard stories from there. And you know what? You can't help but be moved by it. But do I want to do a comic about it? No. But can I use that? As a writer, you're constantly pulling information from everywhere. You're constantly absorbing personalities and talking trends and ideas and things that are happening all around you, and you're putting into this giant meat grinder and kicking out concepts and stories, and that stuff is just grist for the mill. You know, where do you get your ideas from? It's from everywhere. You have to be out there and exposed to so much going on and absorbing it, but just don't seeing it for its face value, figuring it out on how do you take aspects of it to merely work for the story you're telling, not to beat a drum, so to speak, you know?
Cool. Yeah, I 100% agree. So, guys, the concept here is there's two alien crafts that crash on Earth, and like one of them, basically, the U.S. government hires a corporation and they build this like sea lab around it, like to like extract all the technology from. The other one is lost somewhere, and the two aliens are at war for generations, however long it is, and they start to kind of awaken as they take over the bodies of people in Dan's world right here. Meanwhile, Dan set up this corporation with like this corporate superhero group that's actually helping, like, and they're kind of helping, but there's this whole outcast group that's also like not getting helped by them because the corporation's just kind of screwing everybody at the same time while trying to do good. It's a huge, like, this world is a lot for 6 issues. So
it encompasses my entire life.
Yeah.
That's all I gotta say. After working for companies for over 40 years, trust me, you can't help but write about a corporation that screws people.
Yeah, right. And that touched me too. I definitely relate to corporations screwing people. So,
Yeah.
good
I,
stuff. But yeah,
I used to use an expression that I actually put in the book, which I used to say: corporations don't have values; corporations have profits. So the only time they have values is if they think it's going to add to their profits. So when people start to talk about what a company stands for, company stands for money. That's all they ever do. And if you ever think anything more than that, you're misguided. They present themselves differently. And what I like to do is pull back that veneer just to make sure that when we see the people inside the company, while they're talking quietly amongst themselves, they understand exactly what their purpose is, even if everybody else is seeing it for something else.
well, there's a lot of hoobaloo about that, and there's so much like political culture war crap going on in comics now too, with finger pointing and all. Do you attribute most of that on the corporate level then to like incompetence when stuff starts to slide in that direction? Like it's not intentional,
Yeah,
or there's
I,
just a few people who are really loud and
I think
they
it's
get the
just
attention.
yeah, I think it's a few people allowed and a lot of people chasing something that they don't know. The one thing you find out in the corporate world very quickly is most of the people that work and produce things don't know anything about what they produce. Okay, they're not consumers of their own. No, it sounds
Yeah.
stupid, but just the truth. They're not consumers of their own product. So where do they get their information on how their product is being succeeding or failing? They go online now. They're pulling information from these websites and conversations. So what you have now is you have them picking up the most dichotomous points of view, and ultimately aligning with them, which they want to believe the most, and then using that sense to basically validate the choices they're making inside the product, whether it needs it or not.
Wow, that's a lot of mental gymnastics right there. Jeez.
It is, but that's you ask how things are made. That's how things are made.
That's how things are made. Cool.
And it's usually about 20 people in the room making that agreement. By the way,
I do want to get the super chat about the story here because we are talking about Ancient Enemies. Is the story self-contained? Ask Mike. Thank you for $2. Appreciate it.
Yeah, yes, there is a conclusion. So when I have a battle between, I always say when you set up a thing where there's a fight between two characters, you want to know who the winner is. We definitely see who the winner is at the end of the sixth issue.
Excellent. But that is not how superhero versus superhero battles typically go in Marvel and
DC. It isn't.
Yeah.
But I feel that again, if you have people investing in the story, there should be some logical conclusion to the story that you're invested in, or else then it's almost like it's a cheat. And while you can leave room trust me, if you read the last few pages, there's room for a lot of other things to happen because I give you places where everything can go, but there is a conclusion to the story, the conflict that was set up at the start.
That's great. Cool. All right. So if you guys don't know, Dan is not only doing his own book here, but he is overseeing the publishing of Frank Miller Presents also, which is all Frank Miller stuff. And Frank Miller is one of the original canceled people in comics. And I saw him at San Diego Comic-Con. Oh my gosh. He's I hate to say this. He's gotten old and it's making me sad. I want him to continue forever.
First of all, I adore Frank. I think he's just one of the strangely one of the nicest and true lovers of comics. He does comics because he enjoys it. Really enjoys it. And it's been a pleasure working with him. I've known him for a long time. We didn't really set out to start anything. We started out with a conversation, really just talking about what we like about comics. And instead of sitting there and bitching about what we liked or didn't like in comics, we said, why don't we do the books that we like, whether it worked or not? At least we feel that we put our interpretation, our voice, and what we think comics should be on the table. One thing I don't talk about it with Ancient Enemies, but one of my biggest concerns with Ancient Enemies was I absolutely hate coloring in comics today. I think they're murky, they're dark.
Me too.
They're muddy,
oversaturated,
completely oversaturated. And we sat down with the colorist, and I sat down with Alex Sinclair, and we talked about this. And if you look at Ancient Enemies, the colors are really bright, really pop. And I wanted to make sure that these books were.
Speaking of colors in comics, was this one your fault, Dan, or was this after you? Was this
This
one
is
your
the,
fault, or did this come after you?
that's after me. Is that the flocked one?
Okay.
That's a, yeah, that's
Yeah,
after.
this is the one where they oh my god, they ruined
Yeah,
Swamp Thing.
that's after.
I
Yeah.
mean, oh my god. And so the coloring, yeah, it's a big deal. And what you did, you actually have colors that kind of harken back to the early 2000s, where they were a lot brighter and more
Yeah.
distinct in Ancient Enemies.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree
Yeah,
with
there's
you.
very little, like I said, very little foreground background separation these days. It's almost
Mm.
and they're pasting a color over everything with no light source. They're making skin tones the same color as backgrounds. I'm completely lost in that. And as I like to say, people are working on computer now. And just because you can color, because the program is there, doesn't mean you should. And on the other side of the coin, what I like to say is that your light source is behind the screen, not on top of the screen, and it changes the entire perspective when you're
Oh, that's
lighting
true.
on top of a piece of, when the light shows on the paper, not from behind the paper. So again, these are things that sound almost silly to say in a weird way, but are important for me in regards to trying to get a point across, saying, look how books should look, more so than just how they should read or what types of stories you should tell. And Frank felt the same way, and he wanted to get out there and do something bigger and bolder. He didn't want to be held down to the paper. I mean, honestly, truth be told, we don't have any digital copies because we didn't even give it a thought. We didn't want to do it digitally. We wanted to create forms that made the book hard to read on a screen. Frank's doing these beautiful double page layouts that if you do it on a screen, are going to be shrunk to a point that it makes them almost unrecognizable. Same thing with the way Danilo was working. He was working very panoramic and looks beautiful on the printed page. I'm not sure how it looks on the digital. And we didn't give a concern. We weren't worried about that. We just wanted the book to look the best it should be in the format that we were building it for.
That's really interesting, because the way a lot of stuff's done now, it's almost like they build it for Webtoon and then
Yeah,
throw it haphazardly into a book, and that doesn't look good on the paper so much. So you do have to keep in mind different formats and different mediums, and there's a place
absolutely.
for Webtoon,
Oh,
but it should be on
absolutely. Completely.
Webtoon.
I think webtoons
Yeah,
are great. Don't get me wrong; it's a
yeah,
fabulous, but it's a different type of storytelling. It's a different reading experience, and therefore it has to be laid out in a completely different way. Comic books, when you produce a comic, everybody's so used to a periodical being turned into a graphic novel, and and so on and so on, and Absolute or this. They change a couple of sizes, but that's about it. But you got to realize now, one size doesn't fit all, and ultimately, the one style of storytelling shouldn't fit all either. The idea of writing 6 issues to tell one story, unfortunately, at the price point we're at right now for a periodical, I think it's detrimental to the books themselves. Because
absolutely. And they feel, the problem is that so many of them feel like they're written for, well, a lot of them don't even feel like they're written for trade anymore. They feel like they're written for omnibus. And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
well, I'm not even going to wait for the trade anymore. I'm just going to wait for the omnibus of the run, because like it's so spread out at this point. Very, very, very true on that fact.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how many books are currently coming out in the line
Right
from
now,
them right
we
now?
had 3 titles at this when we launched with. It was Ancient Enemies, Ronin Book 2, and Pandora, which Frank created Pandora with Emma Kubert. He wanted to do a young adult fantasy book. So we actually
Cool.
launched, which was Ronin was our science fiction anime manga adventure story. Ancient Enemies was more of our traditional superhero story, and then Pandora was our young adult fantasy. Pandora did a 6-issue miniseries. They're actually working on the next 6-issue arc right now in production. So that'll come out in the beginning of next year. Frank will be wrapping up Ronin probably by the beginning of next year as well. We had some production problems along the way. And then Frank's working on a Sin City prequel, which is interesting for us, called Blood and Dust, which is basically the origin of Basin City, how it came to be. And he also has a one-shot that he's working. You have the art up there right now with Milo Manera. So he actually wrote a story for Milo Manera, and Milo's in the process of drawing that as we speak. And then Frank has a couple other series that we're talking about potentially down the line. So we're managing the line as we go right now. The Svengoolie book was something I wanted to do because of, again, like I said, I was friends with the people. They were asking me who they could go to make a comic, and I said I want to do it with them. So I had a blast working with them. That was more of a one-off, though. We have potential for a second, but we're not sure when. But for the most part, we're keeping everything very tight and a very small publishing line, obviously, because a couple of reasons. There's only 4 people in the entire company. And, we want to make sure the quality is there, but also we have to make sure we're actually doing this all on our own. So we don't have investors in the company or anything like that. So it really is everything's on our shoulders to get it done right.
Cool. Ronin, I actually never read Ronin, which I should probably remedy. But is Ronin 2 readable without Ronin 1, or should go back and like
the opening of Ronin 1, we did a 10-page reintroduction of the characters so that you understood sort of where we are, but it really is its own beast. The Ronin 2 story is an idea that Frank, as he told me, had from the conclusion of the first Ronin. When I was at DC, though, we never had an interest in doing it. Because we always wanted Frank to do more work with our characters, and we knew we had only so much bandwidth. So the fact is, Frank was able to pull aspects of his rights back from Ronin to be able to publish it here, was allowed him to be able to tell a story that he's been wanting to tell for 40 years.
Oh, wow. Cool. Good to know. We do have another question about Ancient Enemy from Mike Has Bad Knees. Thank you for the $5 super chat, my friend. How do the one-shots fit in? Is there an order we should read them in?
Absolutely. The run shots fit in because they're really origin stories. Okay, so they're really the origin stories for each one of the characters, and helps fill out the background on all these characters, on how they came to be before they actually take part in the Ancient Enemy story. The Genie one shot fits in between issues 2 and 3. The Wraith and Son fits in between issues 3 and 4. The Greater Good between 4 and 5, and then First Responder between 5 and 6. What I did is I put Ancient Enemies out on a bi-monthly schedule and then dropped the one-shots in between. So there are things that completely stand alone. Every one-shot is a complete standalone story, but there are aspects, things that happen in there that feed into the series as it goes forward. One of my favorite reviews on the Genie was, they said, this has absolutely nothing to do with Ancient Enemies, to which I wanted to respond, yet. It's because we haven't gotten to those story beats, but it was going to be things that were set up in the Genie one shot are actually playing out in issue 5 and things like that. So I had a lot of fun being able to craft all the little Easter eggs in the different one shots, and not distract from what the actual story is about. But when you read the main series, you'll see things that play into the main series.
Awesome. Now, are you guys going to eventually work on collected editions and things like that, or are you looking?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm meeting with the Diamond folks about collecting it right now. The funny part is that the way it breaks, there's two rules of thought. One is to do 2 separate collections. The only problem is the break in the first collection ends on a really big cliffhanger, and I'm uncomfortable with that. And if I move the next section up, it throws the balance off. Or try to collect it all, but it would be a big book. When you put the whole thing together, you're looking at a collection that's probably about 440 pages.
Yeah, it's huge. That's cool.
Yeah, once the whole
I want an oversized hardcover that's 440
pages.
pages.
And that's one of the things I'm thinking about right now, is just to do it. Because like you said, I put all those little backups in there, and there's a lot of different things with the what's what pages, and we built a map of the world, and had some fun with it. Had some real fun.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to open up questions now, and I will go through the super chats as we got them. You had a little gauntlet at the beginning here, so
go for it. I'm always
never shy for
gauntlets. Okay.
Thank you for becoming a YouTube member. Yeah, you've been to Comic Cons enough to
yeah.
You could answer anything off the top of your head and have no problem, huh?
Not really, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is what it is. You'd be surprised.
Thank you for the $2 super sticker. I appreciate it. The worst thing I asked, so I actually asked when I was like, 18, 19, and I was really excited. I saw Brian Michael Bendis out there, and I walked up at San Diego Comic-Con, and I said, how do you write so many books every month? Like, I mean, you've got this and this and this, and it's just like, I don't know how you can possibly do all that and keep it going. And I just kind of rambled about it for a while, and he just pauses and sighs, and he goes, dude, you just asked me where ideas come from.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm sorry. Yellow Flash, here we go. Let's do this. Thank you for the $20 super, $20 for this thing. What a guy. Thank you. Hello, Mr. DiDio. Please help me understand why you let Super Sons get ruined by aging up John Kent, and then also letting Brian Bendis run Superman into the ground. Speaking of Bendis, Rebirth Superman was fantastic, and so was Super Sons. Yeah, I loved Jurgen's work out
Yeah.
there. He did
Yeah,
such a
yeah,
good job.
Jurgens, is going to go down in history as one of the greatest Superman storytellers. Let's be honest, guys. I mean,
Yeah, you can't beat that. That's all.
no, I
That's all
mean,
there is to it, I
he
think.
runs the character so well, and it's funny. Can I just? I'm going to digress for a second. I'll get right to the story.
Sure.
I just got to digress because your Bendis story. I had the same story with Dan Jurgens when I was younger.
Okay.
Right when I was younger, not young, but when Booster Gold came out, I hated Booster Gold. So I gave Dan Jurgens shit at a convention once about Booster Gold, about why is he stealing Legion rings, why is he doing all these things, dumb character. Dan, super nice to me. There, but he sort of blew off my question. 20 years later, I'm working with Dan, and I go, listen, Dan, I don't know this, but I was this guy that gave you a hard time about Booster Gold. And he looked at me and goes, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you get so many questions like that, you probably have no idea,
that's
right?
Yeah. That's why all this stuff goes on there. Let's go through this. Okay, Super Sons number one. Super Sons, possibly one of my favorite concepts at DC. I bought all those World's Finest issues that were all the Super Sons issues for such a long time. And I loved it so much that I was constantly trying to find a way to work with Super Sons back into the DC universe. But people didn't want it at the time. So until I couldn't pull that trigger until Jim and I became publishers. Then I pulled the trigger on Super Sons. So I wanted
and
that.
Those were like the best DC books of the last decade.
They're great. Pete Tomasi's amazing. They did, and he had such heart in that story, which was great. And it was against what I thought Damian's character was, but he played it so well that you just wanted that book to continue. But like everything, you're constantly forced in a situation where you're constantly trying to renew and get things going. And we honestly, when Bendis came on over to DC, and we were super excited about that. I wanted him to do more Batman, and he felt that was expected. So he wanted to try something different. He actually gave us a really strong pitch for Superman that we thought was going to come together. But unfortunately, Bendis got really sick.
Oh, really? Oh,
got sick for a while. And everything sort of cooled down. So things were sort of moving in half steps. So it never really got the proper launch pad. But when you have an incredible writer, and Bendis is an incredible writer, you got to give them that leeway, to give them that opportunity to succeed or fail. And some people liked it strong, some people worked against it, but you have to give them that choice. You have to let them be themselves. That's why you hire them. You know what I mean? So, and that's what it's all about. So, what I like to say is that I understand what you're saying. Aging Up Jonathan Kent was supposed to be a different story, because we were going to go somewhere with that. We never went to where it was going to go, and that's why that didn't work. The high concept was that Superman was going to become a threat in the future, and Jonathan Kent was brought into the future by the Legion of Superheroes to train himself to stop his father from becoming what was going to happen.
That's a cool story.
You know what I mean? And that's why he disappears, because he's in the future with the Legion. So the Legion stories are with Jonathan Kent, Legion training Jonathan to stop something horrible that's going to happen in the past with his father, and he's the only one who can do it. That was going to be the story. They never got there.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Is that, and I guess that, I mean, this sounds like this happens a lot. I mean, you mentioned the Stephanie Brown origin story kind of didn't work on that. Yeah. Like, it sounds like with reboots and restarts and having, and let's be honest with the comic collector market, like if it says number 1 on it, somebody's going to go buy it. And if it says number 55 on it, they're not going to go buy it. And you do have that problem where you do have to have that constant cycling of relaunches. It sounds like that messes up a lot.
And that's just a real unfortunate shame of the business right now. I'm sorry to say, is that the fact that we have to go to such lengths to redrive or restart an engine, because ultimately you see diminishing returns with every number 1 that comes out there. And the faster that those number 1s appear, the lower the threshold is for the sales on that book, and that which ultimately forces the thing to happen. So anyway.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Yellow Flash. Next gauntlet question. Callum Lyle, thank you for the Australian $5, which I think only comes out to about like 15 cents in American money. But has Jim Lee always been weak-willed, complicit, unable to say no to people? Wow, that's shots fired, because he clearly does not care about the company he's supposed to lead.
Listen, I worked side by side with Jim for 10 years. And I found no better partner to work with. So, I can't answer a question like that. That's a matter of interpretation.
I
You
met
know,
him. He seems nice to me. So I don't
listen,
have that. Yeah.
Jim loves comics. First of all, he loves the comic business and he cares about what's going on. So there's so many, in the nicest way I could say, there are so many external forces put upon everyone. That it seems that somebody may not be focused as distracted, but it's only because there's so many hours in a day. But trust me, Jim's
Yeah.
interest in DC are always first and foremost, even from the time.
And you were in a no-win position a lot there too. I
Yeah,
mean, I
it was.
you know,
I,
yeah.
somebody's look. I always used to say my job was to take the hits so that everybody else could do the job. You know, you got to set up. You had to set up. You had to set up a blockade and stand there and be able to take all the shots, and that way everybody else could still experiment and do things. My running joke is I said it's amazing how many books that suck I was involved in, but I was never involved in anything good during my time.
Yes, it was all the creator and not it's all in spite of you.
When it all works, it's the creator. When it doesn't work, it's all the executive. So
right.
naturally, I didn't realize I was that so be able to really concentrate just making bad things. But who knew?
Callum, thank you again for the Australian $5. Last rant. Why is Tom King still not fired? Everyone hates him, and that Jay Lee incident was just sick. Yeah, I didn't like when he went out and took Jay Lee to task on Twitter trying to cancel Jay Lee. That was a couple years back.
No,
but Dan doesn't work at DC, so he can't.
I can't tell you. Yeah, that's my answer there. But I do like Jay Lee. I believe it or not, I actually wrote Phantom Stranger for a little while. You didn't see that, obviously, but I wrote Phantom Stranger for a little while. Yeah, I'm the one who brought in that whole Judas storyline in Phantom Stranger.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and so I had some beautiful Jay Lee covers. And before I worked in comics, I used to do publicity. And Jay Lee was one of the first people I interviewed for a magazine called Comic Book Week back in the 90s.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm going to track down that Phantom Stranger.
Incredibly talented.
That's cool. So, is there? Did they do trades of the Phantom Stranger that you were?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. I did it,
cool.
and I had to bring to Madison to help me because my full-time job was in the way. But I love that's one of my favorite. I love all the really crazy corners of the DC universe. So when I was writing there, I did. Naturally, I did Outsiders, I did OMAC, I did Phantom Stranger, Challenge of the Unknown, Forever People, and then created Sideways. Cool. And then finished up on Metal Men. Yeah, so I always tried to have a book going all times, but I didn't want to do it under the limelight. I just like to do it off in the corner just to keep that creative energy going because, again, the administrative job can be so overwhelming and pull you away from the creative. This was my one way to tether myself back into the creative aspect of the DCU.
That's really cool. Student of God for $2 says Frank should write for Ripaverse. Eric pays good. I think Frank just does whatever he wants.
Yeah, Frank works for Frank. That's let me trust me on that one. Frank works for that. I mean, Frank is possibly one of the most fiercely independent people that I know. He truly believes about the strength of the independent creator. While he likes to support other people, he drives his creative vision top to bottom, and it's kind of interesting to see. But it's you got to applaud him because it's worked well for him.
Would there be any possibility for me to get him on my show? Would that be possible?
I don't
he can't help me. He can't help me with that, guys. We tried.
No, yeah, he's got a crew.
Carbon Heart, thank you for the $4.99. Dan, do you think there's a chance that our beloved characters like Batman, Superman will be saved from the SJWs who have taken over?
Everything. Look at the cycle of the characters. Look at the world. How many times? Where have we been over the years? And look how many times the characters have changed and moved on.
I just got this. I don't know were you involved in this at all with Silvestri?
Yeah, I was the guy. We put that together at the start. That's
oh my gosh. So this just came out, by the way, guys. It is if you want to talk about Batman, the Joker Deadly Duo by Mark Silvestri. This is so good. So buy this.
It took him about 5 years to make it. I would hope it's good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The art's incredible. Everything's incredible.
Listen, Silvestri, pound for pound, Silvestri is one of the best artists in the business. I mean, just
absolutely.
Just pure style and form. And it's great that he was able to do it. It's just slow. And I mean, I'm not kidding. That took about 5 to 7 years to make that.
5 years for 7 issues, guys. That's how that. Yeah. But it was worth it to me. So Squibs $1.99. Any release date for the Sin City?
Honestly, I'm hoping for first quarter next year. Please don't hold me to it. We're looking for March or April. It's just getting started right now. The thing is that Frank really just dove into Ronin, and it absorbed all this time. And interestingly enough, I mean, we got through a lot, and I was hoping that he was getting started on Sin City, but he actually started doing more art on Ronin. He actually drew the 4th issue. And he's, and he wanted to do more and more work. And he does full layouts for Philip Tan. It's not that Philip's, working from just a script. Frank actually lays physically the book out in pencil and ink. Then Philip's working off of Frank's layout. So he's actually drawing every issue at the same time as Philip is. So
I love Philip Tan's art too, just by itself. So that's what a great combo. Cool.
Yeah, I've known Philip. Philip and I worked together on things like during the Heroes United or Villain Story. We did Eclipso. He actually did Forever People with me. He worked on Outsiders with me. I've known Philip a long time. I've always been a huge fan of his work. Big supporter. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the super chat. EVS Loves Dan says, dumb old Vic for the $4.99. I'm unfamiliar with his work. Well, you can get familiar with his work. Ancient Enemies #6 comes out tomorrow, my friend.
Oh, I was going to say, no, I thought he did.
There you go.
Green Lantern Rebirth. Is that what he's talking about? No.
I'm unfamiliar. Oh, yeah. That was all Dan. Dan did Green Lantern Rebirth. That was all you. We got to give you some credit for stuff, right? If he's making grounds, maybe Mike S. Miller can give him an interview, maybe build up. I don't know that Dan needs to build up a little, but Dan you've been super just like going on every comic channel to promote this. I'm
going to be honest with you. I'm actually winding down.
Okay.
If it's the complete opposite. I'm actually, it's been interesting, coming out of DC and then working with Frank, but it's, to be perfectly honest, I'm more about just doing things that interest me now, and more about just, and that's why I appreciate you having me on, because I'm really here to talk. I'm excited that Ancient Enemies 6 is wrapped up, and so you're sitting in your.
I hope that I got enough talk about Ancient, because I know what it is to be excited. I write, so I hope we're talking about this book enough, because I know.
Like I said, I was just happy to do it, because
cool.
There's so few. If you know the comics business right now, one of the things that's lacking is that information aggregate that pulls it together and hypes it and makes it interesting and lets people know what's going on and happening. There's a lot of great YouTube sites and websites, and here on StreamYard, you got all these things going on all over the place, but there's nothing driving the industry like the 90s did with Wizard Magazine, or something that was basically almost the tastemaker of the industry. Most people are reacting to what's going on, but nobody's really out there projecting excitement about things that are coming to be. And I think that's one of the things that's been lost in comics, is that sense of excitement. Everybody has been really diffused the audience in its own way. And in some ways, we're not that big a crowd to really be spread out that wide. We got to find ways to pull ourselves together about things that really unite the business more so than
always say that. Man, that's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
And your enthusiasm is noted by Brian Rickard for $1.99. Thank you. He says, Metal Men was great. Your enthusiasm is incredible. And that it is. It's infectious, Dan. I'm hyped to go to the comic shop tomorrow. I am.
Comics are silly. They should be fun. We should argue about what we like about our characters and don't like. That's anybody. I'll engage in any argument about any character at any time. I love that shit, because that's what comics. That's what I know, right? Careful what you wish for. It's. I've been doing that for years. I've been doing it before I started DC. I'm doing it now. It's fun. I like getting lost in those worlds and getting excited by what's happening in the books, and I'll be honest, I don't read as much as I used to, and I did a lot, and now I can tell you the truth, I'm one of those older guys that's buying backwards, as I call it, filling in collections more so than really seeing what's going on going forward. Every once in a while something catches my attention, I hear about it, I go out and buy it, but for the most part I'm not prowling those shelves as much as I used to, looking for something. In a lot of senses, mainly because a lot of stuff has been homogenized, so I can't even tell what the titles don't even tell me what a book's about. The cover doesn't tell me what a book's about. I'm not even sure if so I'm not even sure what it is.
It's so weird these days. Yeah.
Yeah. And if somebody says to me, if you read these 3 trades, you'll get a sense of the story, I'm not ready to invest that heavily. I'm not the guy that waits 3 seasons for a show to get good. If it's not good on the first or second episode, I'm not there by the third, So
I have one last super chat, but I've got a question based on that then. So what are your 5 favorite or anywhere into that, runs or comics of all time? Then
Oh God, that's so
where
hard.
do you go with this?
You
Other
know,
than
it's
Stephanie Brown Batgirl, which is the best, you shouldn't
yeah,
have canceled.
my time at DC, my period of time, my sweet spot at DC is from Countdown to Infinite Crisis to the end of the 52 weekly series. That's my sweet spot.
Yeah,
That's my personal. That's the story I wanted to tell, and that was the one I could tell you I was most hands on about
cool.
during my tenure. So that's that. But for what I read, I'm a 70s guy. I hate to say, so I was a big Englehart, Gerber, Thomas, or Conway fan. And I loved all those books. Len Wein and Marv
Cool.
Wolfman. I followed. Those are the writers I followed. I love the art on that. I mean, there's some incredible stuff. I'm just rereading this week John Byrne's Fantastic Four because I forgot how good that was.
Oh, amazing stuff. Yeah.
And I forgot how long he was on that series too. So I just bought those 2 omnibuses. So I've been going through those. Have a blast doing that. You know what I mean? That's been a lot of fun. And every once in a while I pick up something new if I hear some rumblings about it, just to get a sense of that. But I like to, I'm a traditionalist. I'm a superhero guy. I mean, there's no denying that. I was asked, for Batman Day, somebody had me on and they asked me what was my favorite Batman run. And I had to go. It's Englehart Rogers, man. That was even though it was 6-7 issues, that was a big deal for me. That was really that interpretation of Batman that really just locked in my mind who that character should be. And that's something that I carried into the DCU when I went there. But I have a lot of fun. And like I said, I read a lot. I moved from California to Tampa just recently, and I had to get rid of a lot of stuff. And I got rid of 26 long boxes of comics.
Oh, geez, that's a lot.
But I still have 57 copies. You know what I'm saying? So 57
Nice.
long boxes. So I mean, I still got a lot of comics here, but that's in my cut to the bone collection, just to let you know.
Wow. And our final question from Daimo Z is going to take it way back for you. Thank you for the $2 super chat.
Yeah.
Dan got stories from when you did Beast Machine.
Yes, I did. I joined Mainframe Entertainment when they were on Beast Wars, and I was part of the development for Beast Machines. So I had to bring in the writers and sit down with the people from Hasbro and Claster, and we had to hammer out that storyline. And it was interesting because I originally brought in Steve Gerber to do it, but the people at Claster hated Steve and they wouldn't let me work with them. So I brought in this other team, guys, Eisenberg and Skier. They had worked on the Godzilla series that ran for a little while. I forgot what channel it was on. It might have been on WB. But I brought them in and they did a fabulous job. They did a job. My days in animation are some of the ones I remember most fondly because I was at the early days of computer animation for TV. There was no other shows on the air except what we were creating. So the idea of carving new territory and having in some ways, the arrogance to believe this is going to be better than cell animation and try to convince people of that is where, a lot of our drive came from. And it's fun for me now. Here you're looking at this 30 years later. And now cell animation is the aberration and computer animation is everywhere. So everything that we thought was going to be true came true in the end.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And of course, guys, make sure to show your appreciation for Dan by going to your comic shop tomorrow and picking up Ancient Enemies from Frank Miller Presents. This is exciting. And of course, I'll have a full review of the series probably up on the channel this weekend for you guys too. So thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. And I guess that's it. See ya.
Great. Thanks so much, Sam. Thank you.